After months of restrictions to help stop the spread of COVID-19, struggling South Florida businesses are ready to get back to work. But with more and more cases on the rise, what will this mean for our region's economy? We look at the impacts of the pandemic and some resources to help businesses and the unemployed get back to work. That and more. Stay with us as we dive into your South Florida. Hi, I'm Pam Giganti. Welcome to your South Florida. Thanks so much for joining us. Just as Florida businesses began to open their doors again after months of restrictions to help combat the spread of COVID-19, a spike in new cases has put the brakes on some plans, with modified statewide and local restrictions still being enforced, including limiting indoor capacity, wearing masks, and maintaining social distancing. And most recently, the suspension of all alcohol sales at bars statewide, including an announcement by Governor Ron DeSantis that cracks down on businesses that violate these guidelines, including possible fines for those who do not comply. Here in South Florida, this worrisome spike has led local officials to make wearing masks in public mandatory in an effort to stop the spread. Now, with businesses facing an uncertain future and more than 1 million Floridians out of work, what lasting impacts will the pandemic have on the local economy? As part of your South Florida's recent virtual town hall, former Fort Lauderdale Mayor Jack Seiler, current chair of the South Florida Business Council, and Dr. Albert Williams, chair of finance and economics at Nova Southeastern University, shared their thoughts on ways the area's business community can stay resilient during these uncertain times. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam. It's great to be with you. Great to be with Dr. Williams, too.
Let's talk about what's happened to our economy since the beginning of the pandemic. We all know that we had this robust economy going into March, and then all of a sudden, the pandemic hit, schools were closed down, businesses were closed down, there was that stay-at-home order. We really didn't know how long things would be shut down, but now we know it's been months and it's really wreaked havoc on our economy. So talk about the state of the economy as it is now.
A lot of data is hard for people to remember, so I'm just going to hit the core industries. The tourism industry has got the most hit. They have lost over 500,000 people since December to now. Imagine. The cruise industry went from 100% full speed to zero. There's nobody coming on the cruise. So if you look at that, then you think about agriculture. Agriculture is slowing down. We're having challenges with the farm workers. Then if you think about the trade, we've noticed that trade has slowed down. We're not selling as much, and we are not also buying as much. The trade deficit is different now because people are very concerned about their income and they're holding it. In fact, as a country, we have increased our savings, our personal savings have gone up, and that says kudos to us because we're saying, I'm not going to waste my money, I'm going to save it. And the government has been very good in helping with $2 trillion across the individuals as well as throughout the businesses. So the economy has gone from super good to very, very challenging right now.
Jack, I want to bring you in. Let's talk about what the South Florida Business Council does and what you advocate for, because we know that you are really kind of a conglomerate of chambers of commerce throughout the South Florida region. So the whole idea is really to work together, correct?
Correct, Pam. You're 100% right. What the South Florida Business Council is, it is comprised of the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches. And those three chambers came together to create a regional force, to create some synergy between them. You look at what has happened, you look between the three Chamber of Commerces down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach, you've got thousands of businesses, not hundreds, thousands of businesses, and we've got hundreds of thousands of employees in those businesses. And we started to look at how do we take the power of these three counties, these three chambers, and come together and try to move our economy forward and move our South Florida community forward. 4 months ago, we were trying to figure out, how do we fill the skills gap to be able to fill the 30,000 jobs that we need to fill because of the skills gap and working with the educational community. Now we are trying to fill, tens of thousands of jobs that have just become open, as Dr. Williams said, in the tourism industry, in the cruise industry, and in the service industry, restaurants, hotels. So we're still focused on 5 main issues. Number one, mobility and transportation. How do we move people? Not how do we move cars, how do we move people? We've sort of revisited the way we approach that. The second is education quality, not just for the quality of the schools and for the benefit of the students to learn, but for the workforce. Do we have the education necessary to really generate the right workforce to support what we're trying to do? Third is water management. That's, the water quality, water quantity. Do we have water where we need to have water? And have we addressed the issue of too much water where we don't need it, rising sea level? The fourth one is affordable housing. And that is, again, not just a broad affordable housing. This is workforce housing. This is housing for those that we need to work in our businesses, to work in our community. And then 5 is tourism growth. And as Dr. Williams hit on, that right now has shifted from an issue where we were having pretty solid growth, pretty solid tourism numbers. This might be the priority now of the South Florida Business Council, bringing the tourism economy back. So I think we've already seen in areas of education, we're learning. In areas of technology, we would not have been doing this show, Pam, 6 months ago. But now we're learning how to do this. We'd all be sitting around a table with you, answering questions. But this has changed. And I think as a result, education needs to change. We all need to adapt. We need to be more resilient, and we will be. And I'm actually pleasantly optimistic that this was a wake-up call, and we're going to learn from it.
Dr. Williams, you want to chime in and talk about that educational piece too, because we're looking at new skills. That's what Jack's talking about, is that even prior to the pandemic, he says there was a need for skilled workers, especially in tech. So do you start to see that this is going to help move that forward? We're going to see more education in that arena?
I remember I had mentioned some time ago in one of my classes that we depend on the market, we depend on the government, but now we need a third component called the citizen. And that's where Jack comes in with all of the chamber work that they try 3-part story to get the economy back running. So education, universities have a very important role to play. We can do data analysis, but we could educate our people tremendously. So I encourage everyone to become more familiar with using technology, because some more automation may take place, but we will become, if you think about what the world will be later on, we'll have to get people more technology savvy.
Jack, real quick, we've seen now that these cases of coronavirus have gone up, more of these restrictions have been put in place. We know the beaches have been closed from Palm Beach all the way down to Monroe County, clearly for the 4th of July weekend. That's going to affect businesses who may have been counting on some of that revenue. We've seen too that bars have been shut down. All we understand to try and slow the spread of coronavirus. But as somebody who's worked in the public sector as a mayor and now working in the private sector, talk about those challenges in this kind of environment. And are you hearing from businesses that say they're just really strained because of all of this?
1,000 businesses are asking, how do we adjust? How do we adapt? So we do see that happening. As we look at this, though, I think you have to recognize it's a balance. I understand the mayor's challenges. I understand what the counties are dealing with, the cities. We're here as the private sector, the business community. And what we're trying to do is support the good policies that we see coming forward. Things such as, wearing face masks in public, social distancing, watching density in social gatherings. Those are the things the business communities are pushing and trying to make sure that the public sector promotes that. We'd like to get the confidence back here in the South Florida community that, hey, whether it be the vaccine, as Dr. Williams mentioned, whether it be the fact that we've sufficiently done what needs to be done to put this, the tourism sector can come back. Let's be honest. This is paradise. And that means other people want a vacation here. Other people want to bring their businesses here. So we've got to get the confidence back. And that's where the public sector has to work with the private sector to get that message out. If we can tell the world that, hey, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Palm Beach, we're back open for business. Come on down for the bowl game. Come on down with your families. Bring your businesses down. Relocate. That's the confidence we need to instill. And that challenge, Pam, is that we have to make sure governments understand, let's take the least restricted but most effective approach to make sure that the businesses can prosper and grow.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you, Pam.
appreciate
Great
it.
to see you. Doctor, take care.
Thank you very much, Stu. Thank you, Jack.
According to a May 2020 survey by the U.S. Census Bureau, nearly 45% of Florida's small business owners reported the COVID-19 pandemic had a large negative effect on their business, with about 34% only having enough cash on hand to keep their doors open for a month or less. Money from the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, to help pay employees is set to run out. Now many business owners are facing some tough decisions. Should they apply for a loan, file for bankruptcy, or close up altogether? Entrepreneur Felicia Hatcher, co-founder of Code Fever and Black Tech Week, and Dr. Maria Ilcheva, Associate Director of Planning and Operation at the FIU Metropolitan Center, join me as part of our virtual town hall to discuss ways South Florida's small business community can try and overcome these obstacles while helping rebuild the local economy. Maria, let's start with you. Let's talk about what the FIU Metropolitan Center does and how you're uniquely positioned right now with the COVID-19 pandemic to talk about businesses and hopefully the future of businesses and maybe some of the things they can do to remain sustainable right now.
Our center is a university-based think tank, and for over 2 decades now, we've been providing policy guidance through data analytics to solve some of the most pressing challenges and to respond to some of the questions that our decision makers keep asking, including housing, economic development, business development, talent retention, and workforce strategies. All of these are topics we've researched and we've presented studies on that have resulted in real positive change. Our economy is a micro-business economy with over 80% of our establishments employing fewer than 10 workers. That matters a lot because margins are already low, and when we have such a business composition, it also suggests that these businesses may not have the survivability rates, they may not have the flexibility to pivot their services and their operations to respond to the current challenges.
And Felicia, I want to bring you in. Let's talk about the impacts that COVID has had on the tech space and on Black-owned businesses.
It's been traumatic, right, and devastating for lives and then businesses overall. As it relates to the Black community, studies are showing that about 40% of our businesses have closed and will not reopen in whatever the new normal ends up being. And so that just has an immense impact, not just on businesses, but then lives. You see a study that said that 4.3 million people did not pay their mortgages last month, and that will continue month after month. And so we were in dire straits as far as not having the resources that were needed to really build thriving Black businesses in our communities and across the nation already. And then you put a pandemic on top of that. And then you put the social and emotional issues around race relations and racial inequity on top of that. And you have a recipe for disaster as it relates to being able to pick ourselves back up. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done around finding not just the resources from government, right, and loans. And I think a lot of the conversation has been around that, but then knowing that this was a problem that was already starting to happen. And I think tech provides an opportunity and a solution to rectify that as much as possible. Businesses can start faster than they have been with not as much capital, right? Moving from brick and mortar to more online businesses, whether those are e-commerce platforms, whether those are software or hardware companies, they provide opportunities. I think as it relates to jobs, we haven't seen the big shift as far as unemployment is concerned in the tech sector as we've seen in other areas. Why? Because we've all needed it more than we had, 3.5 months ago. And I think those people that kind of dismissed technology or thought it was going to disrupt lives or disrupt jobs are now leaning on it much more than we have had in the past and are valuing it much more, not just for connectivity, but to essentially allow businesses to be able to pivot.
Yeah. Maria, chime in here. Let's talk about small business and also about about manufacturing. I know that's something that the Metropolitan Center has really focused on, because we know, as we heard from Dr. Williams earlier, agriculture's big, tourism's huge, but there are other sectors that we need to focus on, right?
That's right. We've been talking again for years about the need to diversify our economy, and that's true for any community. When you are dependent on one specific sector or only a cluster of sectors, you're much more vulnerable, and our current situation clearly demonstrates that. But we are also talking about an opportunity here, and as Felicia mentioned, her and others have already done major inroads into that sector, the tech sector. We're also talking about advanced manufacturing, which relies heavily on research and development. So technology, automation, robotics, all of these new trends will play a major role. And this hopefully reindustrialization of our region provides that opportunity to diversify the economy and to create these jobs that will create a sustainable, more inclusive and more equitable economy and community. So shifting our focus and exploring those different opportunities, moving in a direction towards other sectors, bringing in other companies here, or creating new homegrown businesses in these sectors is a better option for us.
Yeah, and then tell us, what are some of the lessons we really learned from the 2008, 2009 downturn? Can we use some of those here?
I mean, for me as an entrepreneur, I started my first real business in the last economic downturn, right? Did not know enough to realize that it was probably the worst time to start a business. And so I personally have a lot of lessons that I learned. I think this resiliency that we talk about Miami having and Miamians having is something that we're going to lean on more heavier. And it's a big lesson that we learned in the last economic downturn. Something Maria said about, not relying solely on like the kind of the hospitality and tourism industry, which is kind of the underbelly of our industry here in South Florida, and really realizing that we're going to have to diversify. It's about designing the new normal and all of us playing a role in that. But the fact that major technology companies, even like Amazon, did not decide to come here, but a lot of them are fully going remote, actually presents a huge opportunity for those that are in the, not just in the tech and innovation space, but remember, tech is really broad. And so the fact that those companies are going fully remote actually presents an opportunity for our tech talent and innovation talent and our sales and logistics talent here to be able to still live here in Miami, get a high wage salary, which is something that we constantly are asking to happen here in Miami, and not contribute to the brain drain issue that we constantly have, because now they can live here and work here, but be working for a company in Silicon Valley or across wherever in the world, but not lose who they are and their financial contributions to our economy. And so that is one way, I think, a potential silver lining out of all the craziness that we can look at if we double down our support and resources to making sure that we're matching our coding boot camps, our colleges and universities to these new remote opportunities, and making sure our young people and our adults are equipped for that, and then helping them kind of retool how they make those connections in order to be able to get on the radar of those job opportunities.
One of the things you've said before is use our privilege to affect change. Kind of talk to us about how we all as a whole, as society, can elevate the Black Lives Matter movement during this time going forward to make everything better, the economy better, business better, the way we interact with each other better. What do you suggest?
Yeah, a lot. What can we do as individuals in our everyday lives to be more equitable and fair, realizing the biases that we just innately kind of have as human beings, and how layered that is and what that means to other people, and that's personally. And that our companies need to play a much better role, right? Not just because of the changing economy and making sure the products and services that we are building are more culturally relevant, but that we're also making more compassionate transactions and looking again at the Black community as contributors, and not looking at it from a deficit standpoint, but really looking at it from an asset standpoint, right? Like that's where we can start. Then the other part is like influencing advocacy and then policy, because policy has to change, right? What we're seeing around police brutality is a lack of accountability. And so that definitely starts with what happens in November, right? In our election cycle, but then it also happens on a local level. Like, what are we doing? How are we putting more better policies in place? And then how are we holding people accountable so that this does not continue to happen? And can Miami set the tone, an example of like what it truly means to be equitable and fair and have inclusion, and then be able to build a competitive society afterwards? Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done here and that can be done. And so companies can play their role. How can they actually start helping us make sure that these 40% of businesses come back, or we use technology to help them help build thriving innovation communities that are in Black neighborhoods?
We are a community which relies on entrepreneurship, and the entrepreneurial spirit is actually driven by Black and brown and entrepreneurs, specifically in South Florida. Our business community is our economic engine. It's not the visitors. It is the business community that drives our economy, and we should acknowledge that and focus our efforts in building up and creating more opportunities for them to, for new businesses to be created, or the existing ones to grow and prosper.
Ladies, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate all your wisdom and your information tonight. I know it's helping a lot of people. It's what we needed to hear tonight. Thank you so much. Just as the COVID-19 pandemic hit, despite low unemployment numbers, many Florida families were already hurting. According to a report by the United Way, more than 2.5 million Florida households were facing financial ruin. That's a 10-year record high. They're called the ALICE population, which stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. They're part of a growing group that have little to no savings and basically live paycheck to paycheck, essentially one emergency away from financial trouble. We wrapped up our recent virtual town hall with the United Way of Broward President and CEO Kathleen Cannon. She shares more about the extraordinary burden the pandemic is having on this population and the local resources in place to help them out. Hi there. Thanks so much for being with us. Let's talk about that ALICE population. We've talked about it before, but we need to remind people it's an acronym. So what does ALICE stand for, and what does it mean to us?
So ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. Now that's a big word or a big acronym, but it really is about people that are working hard, doing all the right things here, raising their kids, going to work, sometimes full-time jobs, sometimes gig jobs, sometimes entrepreneurship, working multiple part-time jobs, but still cannot make their ends meet out of the end of a paycheck for no cause of their own. We decided to really study this, Pam. We knew it was happening. Being in the human service field and being a social worker, we could see folks struggling that they don't look like they're struggling, and they're the folks that are taking care of our little ones and daycare workers and working in nursing homes and our service industry. You heard Jack Seiler talk about that, and tourism. Sort of the folks that are running our society and serving us and doing all these great businesses all day long. However, we studied what it costs to have a basic threshold budget. So to take care of your housing, your food, your transportation, your healthcare, minimum technology, and we put that budget together. And the ALICE budget is the lowest level survival budget just to be able to make your ends meet. And Pam, you and I have talked about this here in Broward, and in Miami and Palm Beach. In Broward here, 50% of our families live below that ALICE threshold. So 13% of those families actually live in poverty, and the other 37% live in what we call the ALICE threshold. So they're not going to qualify for different types of services. Again, they're working hard, but cannot put food on their table at times at the end of a paycheck. And God forbid if something happens and there's an emergency, they are literally just a couple $100s away from falling into poverty. So we wanted to study this with data and really showcase this to the community.
And I think what it's important too to discuss is when people think of people who are struggling, they might think of people who are poor. Mm-hmm. And people who are poor, as we notice, there's what's the poverty level. And when you live below a certain amount, you actually qualify for certain services. But when you're above that, and let's talk about what those ALICE families look like, because I think some people don't realize that could be your next door neighbor.
Is that people serving your coffee at Starbucks or local. It's our waiters and waitresses. And you don't visually see that they're struggling, right? When you see a homeless person on the street, you can see, right? There's issues, problems, there's real struggles. The ALICE population, you don't see it, they don't talk about it, but they are filled with so much financial strife. It's what they think about all day, every day, trying to get ahead, trying to make their ends meet, how they're going to stretch that paycheck. Then COVID hits. And so many people, not just losing a day's wages or a week's wages, but losing their job. So you can see the exponential worry and burden that happens with families in this ALICE threshold.
So let's talk about what the United Way is doing to help these families, because all of us have seen that there have been these long lines at the food banks. I think the food insecurity is one of the things that has affected people the most with COVID. So talk about the resources you all are providing.
Right away, we knew there would be need for emergency financial assistance, trying to keep folks and families at least current on their rent and their mortgage or their car payment or the utilities payment, and then food and feedings. People who do not get a paycheck cannot put food on their table. I've been a social worker since 1986 here. I have never seen more hunger since my entire career here. And then the mental health and wearing on people and the social isolation. So we immediately launched in and opened a COVID response fund in those areas, trying to pay people's rents and mortgage. We really don't want people to fall into homelessness. And then we have doubled down. We've done well over $1 million just on food and just on feedings. We have doubled all the deliveries that we have already done to all the food banks in Broward County. Plus there's shut-in seniors, there's aging veterans, there's all these ALICE families. So it's a comprehensive look at the community, trying to blanket the community with strategy so that people don't fall further behind. To give you a sense, and Pam, we've talked about this, 211 is the phone number that people should call for assistance.
Talk about that for a moment, because people might think it's more for an emergency, but this is really the way to get services, right?
This is the way to get services. On your cell phone, you just dial 211 on your landline. However, it is not a crisis hotline. It is a helpline, meaning all of the folks are trained to answer your phone and to answer your call and attempt to get you the services that you need.
You're accepting volunteers now, right? But you're doing it carefully. Everybody's wearing a mask, et cetera, social distancing. Talk a little bit about that.
We are outfitting every volunteer, of course, with masks, social distancing, hand sanitizers. We are doing more of the brunt of the face-to-face in the community, but asking volunteers to do other types of activities with us. They can literally go on our website. We have a volunteer portal, and we also have something called Heroes, and that's volunteers that do want to be boots on the ground. Again, we promise to keep you safe, but we also have virtual opportunities. We're doing readings, we're collecting hygiene kits, we're doing shoe boxes for homelessness. There are many, many opportunities for virtual volunteering as well.
We thank you for all of the work that the United Way continues to do in our community. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, Kathleen. I really appreciate it.
You.
We'll have more information on everything we discussed on today's program, plus additional resources on our Facebook page at Your South FL, where you can also watch our town hall in its entirety. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next time. Until then, stay safe and healthy.